Hey everyone, I'm Nate Vinio, and this week's episode is a bit outside the norm. I just want to take a moment and lay a bit of a foundation for this series. I think it'll help us pack more content into future episodes. And we'll be picking up next week with a study on David and Joab. And honestly, it blew my mind. It still does, frankly. So this is just a quick synopsis. Some baseline perspectives or thoughts for you to process each episode with. First, handling conflict David style, we'll take a look at how David obviously handled conflict. His life and action and his inaction provide great illustrations for us to either follow suit or to flat out avoid. With illustrations, you'll have what I call positive illustrations, in which we should emulate that characteristic. Then you'll have what I call negative illustrations, where we want to do the exact opposite or something completely different from what the character is doing. Consequently, you might see changes in an episode title to include Not Handling Conflict, David style. Number 2, I'm excited about this series because it'll build. Lessons learned in one episode will be reinforced in future episodes, and future episodes may only make sense in light of previous episodes. So if you're catching one of these episodes out of order, it's not the end of the world, but you may get more out of it if you go back to the first episode and do a bit of binge listening. Number 3, my approach to this may be considered a bit odd. I'm not going to be handling this in a verse-by-verse style. At the same time, I will not be cherry-picking the entirety of Scripture to pad the presentation. But you will find several references to teaching in the New Testament that reinforce the characteristic of every episode, showing the harmony of Scripture where lessons and qualities of the Old Testament are reinforced in the New Testament. It will have the more traditional opening parable-style story at the beginning, but this will be more of a character study, where each episode will follow David and his interactions with another character through the books of Samuel, the first part of Kings, and the first part of Chronicles. Again, you can see how these episodes could layer on top of each other. The central character in one episode may very well be the sideline character in another episode, or vice versa. Please keep in mind a few things about Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. There's a similar dynamic in effect as we see in the Gospels, where multiple authors write about the same events, except in this case, there's a significant difference in the time frame. For example, tradition has 1st and 2nd Samuel being written by Samuel and written almost in real time. Tradition has Jeremiah writing Kings many years later, with a writing date around the time of the exile. And lastly, tradition has Chronicles being written by Ezra, and interestingly enough, you will find that the last chapter of 2nd Chronicles is an exact duplicate of the first chapter of the book of Ezra. And this puts the writing date at some point near the end or after the end of the exile. The point of bringing this up about the books and their authors and the time frame is that some things are seen and understood best in real time, while others are best understood with a distant historical perspective. This study will sync these perspectives, using 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st Kings, and 1st Chronicles to give a well-lit, well-rounded, full picture of David and his interactions with these other characters in the novel, if you will. And yes, I think the best way to look at these books is as novels, not chapter and verse. Also, I'm making the assumption that listeners have a basic understanding of the life of David. It isn't absolutely necessary, but it would sure make more sense. So keep in mind that the purpose of this series is to highlight the conflicts, to highlight the specific characteristics through David's life in overcoming these. So feel free to listen in if you haven't got a good handle on the skeletal outline of these stories. But please do yourself a favor and take the time on your own to read up on these stories. It's a biography, really. Don't get hung up on the chapters and verses. Treat it like a book. Embrace the characters. Embrace and enact the positive characteristics. Reject and defend against the negative characteristics. Sometimes we read in a micro sense, meaning that we read a chapter at a time or a verse at a time, and that should be essential in everyone's personal time with the Lord. At the same time, occasionally there's a need to soak up a larger and broader portion of Scripture and get the macro perspective. And I think what you will see is that I'm trying to navigate that dynamic by following several threads through David's life from start to finish, weaving a beautiful picture. Lastly, a core value of this podcast is to keep episodes short. The target has always been 15 minutes or less, a bit over a few times, but 15 minutes is the goal. On a couple of occasions, I've had episodes that have gone significantly over that time frame. I've been unable to give the topic the attention it deserves by staying under 15 minutes. At the same time, I don't want to go over that and alienate people. So, when this happens, rather than issue 2 separate podcasts dividing it in half, I will make one podcast approximately 30 minutes long and put a hard break in the middle so you can either plow right on through or pause and come back to it in the future. Either way, some of these are highly detailed, and I don't want to lose people in the details or the time. So please feel free to take a break, because overall, I want you to get all that the episode has to offer. I appreciate your patience with such a boring episode, so I best keep it short. I just want to give you some ideas on what to expect on this series so that you get the most out of it. I'm Nate Vinio, and this has been an introduction to the Handling Conflict King David Style series. Until next week, God bless.